Now we're on Daf Ches Omid Beis. Akriye bechalme. What happened is that Rav Papa dreamed a dream, and in that dream they read a pasuk to him. And what pasuk did they read? This pasuk in Zechariah that we mentioned earlier, V'achid eshloshes haroim, and I will sort of subjugate these three greats. And Rav Papa understood that the reason why in this dream he heard this pasuk being read is because he realized that there's going to be a tremendous punishment, a midas haparanius against these three scholars, because they had embarrassed Rav Papa by making these signs amongst themselves, like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. The morning after this dream, he took leave of these three students after the cheer, like normally, like any other day. But Amar Lahu, but he said to them, Lizlu Rabbanon Bishlam. Now here on both sides we have a tremendous argument amongst the commentaries. What exactly took place here? What did Rav Papa do? And it's one of those debates. You know what I mean when I say minakotza lakotza, like from one extreme to the other? So the first interpretation, which is pretty much the standard interpretation, and it's offered by the Marsha, by the Sfas Emes, so I mean, just a whole group of people. They say that usually when you take leave of a person, you say to him, Lech lishalom. But instead, he said to them, Lech b'shalom. And there's a world of a difference between the two. Lech l'shalom means go in peace and come back in peace. And Lech b'shalom means that's it. Your life is over. That's what we say to a mess. Lech b'shalom. And this is all based on a Gemara in Brachas Daf Samach Dalet. So apparently Rav Papa was so makpid, and he understood that this dream could come to fruition, and they would all be decreed for death if he was makpid, and therefore he assumed that since they had insulted him, then this would come to pass, and therefore he said to them, Lech bishal. However, the alternative, and again, it's just the other extreme, is based on a girsa, which we don't have in our Gemara, of Lezlu Rabbanon Lishlam. And if you have that girsa, you just changing one letter from Bishlama to Lishlama, then Rav Papa was giving them a bracha to save them and protect them from this dream, that this dream should not come to fruition. The Haisel Levarcham Kadeshi Natzlu, they would be saved minachalom. And the Marsha offers another interpretation based on that alternative girsa, that Kavanaso Rav Papa's intention was to, in a sense, throw them away, so to speak, eject them, or expel them. Oh, I haven't heard that word in a long time. His intention was to expel them from the Beis Medrash, and that would be a kiyum. That would again be enough to fulfill the prophecy of this dream of Ekchideh. So instead of dying, they would just be expelled from the class. But that was his way of intervening in order to save them. Rav Shimi bar Ashi Avishliach Kamei Rav Papa. Another story about the covet of Rav Papa. In this case, it's Rav Shimi. He was very sharp, very astute. He kept asking kashas on Rav Papa's Torah, and he was really slugging up Rav Papa. Yom Echad, on one particular day, Rav Shimi realized that he had overstepped his bounds. Chazir did nafal al apeh. He noticed that Rav Papa, when he put his head down for tachnu, Shamei, Rav Shimi was able to overhear the words that came out of the mouth of Rav Papa. The Omer Achmana Litzal Mikisufa the Shimi. God, please save me from the embarrassment that I'm suffering as a result of Shimi. His question, and he stumps me, it caused me a tremendous amount of humiliation. And Rav Shimi, at that point, having overheard Rav Papa in his tefillah, understood that he, Rav Shimi, was guilty for embarrassing Rav Papa. Kibel alei shtikutza. He accepted upon himself never to ask any questions. Shtikutza means shtika, silence. Besulo actually, and he never asked any other questions. It's really interesting because normally when a person is praying, you don't overhear what they say. I don't know if you ever had an experience in your life where you overheard someone praying. I had such an experience, and in Har Nof, there are a lot of Rosh Yeshivas, so I had to be davening right next to a Rosh Yeshiva. And I overheard him, he kept saying over and over again the same prayer in his own words. I mean, it's quite a powerful experience, and I remember it, like 20 years later. The Reish Lakish Savar, Reish Lakish also maintained the same position of Rabbi Yochanan, that even for a yachid, for one individual, God will bring down the rains. How do we see this? The Reish Lakish minayin lemata b'shvil yachid. How do we know from whence we derive that God will bring down the rains even for an individual? It says in Zechariah, "Sha'alu me'Hashem matar b'eis malkosh." Malkosh is the rains at the end of the rainy season. Hashem oseh chazizim. God creates clouds, and we're going to have a whole long discussion about what kind of clouds are called chazizim. Usually it says ananim, but here it says chazizim. Umitar geshem yitein lahem, and then it says leish esev basada. Ish, one individual. Reish Lakish understands that this leish is teaching me that even for the benefit of one individual, God will bring down the rains late in the season. Yochel might think lakol. I might think that maybe God is bringing down the rains for the benefit of everyone. Talmud lomer leish. But because the pasuk ends leish esav basada, we have a clear-cut proof that God will bring down the rains for one individual, for the benefit of one individual. The leish. Now that we've learned from the pasuk that God will bring it down for Yochel, I might come to the conclusion that God will bring the geshamim for one person, l'cholz dotzav, only if all his fields are in jeopardy because he didn't get to water them and there wasn't enough rains for them. Talmud Lomar, but the pasuk says basadeh, leish esav basadeh, this one field. So that God will bring about Geshem for the sake of one field that this Joe owns. So he has many fields, and one field needs rain. God will bring down the rain miraculously for the benefit of one single field. Isada, now that we've come to the conclusion that God will bring down the rains even for one single field, is maybe we would say lechol hasada, only if the entire field, in all its boundaries, needs rain. Talmud Lomar Esev. What the Torah says, Oskin Zechariah, Leish Esev. Esev means one blade, Basada. Baruch Hu brings out the rains, even if one blade of grass needs the rain. Tosfos explains here that the rain is going to come down on that ace, just on that one blade of grass. And now the Gemara quotes a story to illustrate that the rains will come down for one individual. The other of Daniel Bar Katina, it seems like he was a great Amora. I don't remember. Gentlemen, do you remember his name from anywhere else? I don't know. Rav Daniel Bar Katina. Havalei Hahigi Nasa, he owned a garden. Kol Yom Avi Ozil B'Sayerle. On a daily basis, he would go out to the garden to check it and to see if it needed water. The Omar declared, Ha Mishra Bayamaya. This line, in Hebrew it's called an aruga. They used to plant, and they still do it today, in lines, in rows. So this particular row, he declared, needs water. And as a result of his declaration, also Mitra, rain came down, become mashki kol hechel maya, and it watered any place that needed water. Again, this Rav Daniel must have been up there in the greats. Gemara asks the following question. We had this pasuk in Zechariah where Hashem oseh chazizim, a very strange word. Normally it would have said ananim. So Maya Hashem oseh chazizim. And not only that, the Gemara is bothered by the fact that it's in Lashon Rabbah, because we're talking about the pasuk from which Reish Lakish derives that even for one individual, it says Leish Esav Basada. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina Malami Shekol Tzadik V'Tzadik, Kodesh Baruch Hu Oselo Chaziz B'Fnei Atzma. When a person who's a tzaddik comes into this world, God will prepare for him a very special cloud that's singularly dedicated for him, for this tzaddik. And that cloud will contain within it exactly the measure of rain that this tzaddik needs for his field. And the Gemara clarifies, "My chazizin am Rabbi Yehuda parchos." These clouds are different than other clouds. They are very light clouds, and they parchim. Parchim means they fly from place to place very easily. When you have a thick cloud, you need a great wind to blow the cloud. But if it's a thin mist, then it moves quickly from place to place. Rabbi Yochanan Simon Lemotar. Again, we want to know whether or not rains are going to come. You're looking for a sign. Maybe you could ask your local meteorologist, is it going to rain or not? What do you call it? Type into Google weather forecast. But Rabbi Yochanan has his own Simon Lamatar, and that's Porchos. What does that mean? My Porchos. Omer Rab Papa, Eva Klisha Tuse Eva Smichta. It seems that you can have a very thick cloud that's high in the sky, and underneath it, it's sort of being accompanied by a thin cloud. And in such a case, that's a simon that you're going to get a really good downpour, a healthy butter. So do we have it on both sides? Because we got to get this down pat because it's going to come up over and over again. So you've got this thick cloud that's high, and then below it you have a thin cloud. That, according to Rabbi Yochanan, is a simon. I actually wanted to Google this and see if there's any, scientific, if science reflects this whole idea. I didn't get a chance to do it, so maybe we'll do it for tomorrow. Rabbi Yehuda. Nehila Mekame Mitra. He's comparing rain to flour. Flour after it is, what do you call it? Put to the sieve. What's it called? It's sifted, maybe. Anyway, after it's sifted, I'll use that word, it becomes very thin. And sometimes you have thin geshem, tipos dakos, very small drops of rain that come down. And when that happens, that's a harbinger, a precursor of a heavy rain that's going to come after it. So the light rain comes first, and afterwards comes the heavy rain. Asi Mitra, and that the rains are going to come. So this is Rabbi Yehuda's Simon. Now he's not looking at cloud formation as much as the fact that the rains are coming down, light rains, and that's a a forebear, that's an indication that there's going to be heavy rains. Which is always a good thing if you know it's going to rain heavy. I mean, for farmers, it's very important. And even for travelers and, even people who are walking the streets, they have to know if there's going to be a heavy rain. Basar mitra, if on the other hand, that very thin rain, that tipos dakos of rain, comes after a heavy rain. So first what happened was you had very strong rain that came down, and then it became weaker, and pasek mitra, that is a simon that the rains are going to stop. Not exactly sure what the chiddush here is, because obviously if now it's, instead of a heavy torrent, it's small drops. Obviously the rain is about to stop. The coming mitra, now he goes back to the ratio and he says, if before the rains came, he saw, he experienced these small drops, Asi Mitra, he knows that the heavy rains are about to come, the Simonech, and I'll give you an illusion, Meholsa. If you have a sieve in order to sift the flour, then what happens is the smaller flour goes through the holes first, and then after he refines the upper flour, then they come down. So it's a process, and you begin with the smaller pieces. He writes here in Hebrew, Nafa shel kemach, a special sifter that's used to sift flour. At stage number one, the kemach comes out very thin. Then the thicker ones come later. That's a law of physics. If you have holes, the smaller, thinner are going to go first, and then the thicker ones. And the same thing by analogy applies to Geshem. It begins with a light rain, and then afterwards, the rain becomes very strong. Now, let's go to the following case. Kishamaskal Eredis Geshem Kal. What happens when you see a light rain that follows a heavy rain? In such a case, that's an indication, Posak Mitra, that the rains are coming to a stop. But Simonech, and what's the remnants for the fact that if the rains taper off, it means they're about to end? Charye de'ize. Again, you'd have to Google this. The Gemara says that when a goat, if I can use the word, defecates, then first the feces come out like big hard pieces, and then afterwards the smaller pieces come out. The nimchal is that the same thing with Geshem, that if first you have a very heavy rain that comes down, then afterwards you should know it's going to taper off until it'll stop entirely. Ula ikula bavel. Ula came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. Chaza, he saw clouds, parchos, which we said that if they're parchos, those very thin clouds, that's a simon that it's going to rain. Amalahu, he told the local people, Panu money, take away your money are kalim, are vessels from the exposed courtyard. Dahashta osi mitra, I can guarantee you that now torrents of rain are going to come down. So floxy mitra. At the end, the rains didn't come down. And Ula sees in this phenomenon something metaphysical. There's like a message here about ethics. And there's a relationship between ethics and rain. Rain, we think, is a phenomenon in nature, in biology, but no. Rain is controlled. We saw many Gemaras beforehand on the previous dapim that if we're not behaving properly, the rains are not going to come. Omar, so Ula declared, here in Bavel, there are a bunch of liars. And therefore, their rains are also going to falsify the truth. They're also going to be liars. Nature follows man. it reflects a mirror image of the way man behaves. And here in Bavel, there are a bunch of liars, a bunch of swindlers. And as a result, the Geshem is also going to trick them. And when there should be Geshem, and we predicted it, Ula predicted it, and yet it didn't come down. Ula ikla Bavel, on another occasion, Ula came to Bavel. Chazi, what he saw was Malod Sana. Sana is a sal. So there's a full basket, the tamre, full of dates. And he saw this in the marketplace. They were selling it for a zuz. Zuz is a very small amount of money. It's like 10 shekel, I don't know, 5 shekel, a very small amount. And yet it was a full basket's worth of dates. How could it be that in Bavel they got such a great, bracha from Shemayim that something as expensive as dates is being sold for peanuts? Omar, so Ula declared about the sustenance that comes down from the heavens. Could it be, he says, that you can get a full basket's worth of duvsha? Duvsha is dvash, because in those days, the dvash didn't come from bees and beehives. It came from crushed dates. That's how they made honey. And could it be that for one zuz, such an inexpensive price, you could purchase a full sal, a full basket's worth of dvash, of tamarim? And if that be the case, then if the plenty of the food is so cheap, then they could dedicate themselves to Torah study. They don't have to go out and bother themselves day and night with a parnasa. Sometimes if you travel in other countries, things that are very expensive here are bupkis, are inexpensive elsewhere. Like, for example, in fruits, obviously, if you want to buy mango here in this country, you're going to pay for it. If you go to Florida, you can almost pick up the mango off the floor for free. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but in every country, they have a certain plenty of a supply of X, whatever that food is, and it sells cheap. And yet, the Bavloim are not studying Torah. Look at that great opportunity. They have such a plenty of food at such an inexpensive price. They don't have to drive themselves crazy Yom V'Layla and work in order to earn a living and spend money. There's no inflation over here. They should be studying Torah, Yom V'Layla. And the implication here is that Ula is criticizing the Bavli. In any event, Ula himself, obviously for Zuz, he couldn't resist buying, getting such a good deal on a full sal's worth of dvash, but it didn't work out so well for Ula. Bilela tsaru, which means that he got diarrhea that night from eating this dvash, Omar, and then he declared, and he sort of rescinded his original position, Milot Tzana de Sakina Bezuza. What they're really selling here for a full basket is not tmarim, it's not dvash, but rather it's sakinin, it's knives. That's how much suffering he felt when he ate this from this sal. You can get yourself a basket full of sharp knives for one zuz. And just like knives are very dangerous to the body, so too these tamarim are very dangerous. Bavloi aski bo rice. And now he turned it in the other way. And he said, he complimented and he built up the Bavlim. And he said, you know what? They are osek b'Torah. Even though it's no bargain here, what you're going to get for a zuz is something that's detrimental to your health. And if you want to get something healthier, you're going to have to pay big bucks for it, many zuzim, but nevertheless, they still dedicate themselves to it. So he started with a critique against the Bavliim, but then he ended up with a praise and a recognition of the greatness of the Bavliim. Tanya, we went to the Bryce Rebbe Lazar Kololam Kulumi O Kainus. Who showed so? We're going to have a major machlokas here. Where's the source of rains? According to Rabbi Eliezer, the source of rains are down here on earth. And what happens is the water in the oceans sort of evaporates and then comes down from the clouds. At the time of creation, the pasuk says that a certain mist of moisture comes up from the ground, meaning from the globe, in this case from the oceans, and the Hitchka is called Pnei Adam. And it's responsible for giving water for the entire globe. However, the Gemara rejects this. Omar Rabbi Yeshua, what are you talking about? Hello, meme o kindness meluchim. You can't grow anything with that water. It's salty water. I mean, we have in Israel a desalinization program. But in those days, it wasn't thinkable that salt water could somehow be matzmiach the tfuah. So it must be that the Mei Geshamim are coming from a different source. They're not coming back from the Okainus. Rabbi Lezer responds, Omar Lo, mismaskin b'ov. There is a desalinization process up in the clouds. So the ocean water now evaporates. It goes up to the clouds. The clouds will remove the salt element, and then the rains come down. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Kol Olam Kulo Mimayim Ha'elyonim Hu Shoseh. The rains come from some sort of higher, heavenly Elyonim. That's what gives moisture and rain and water to the ground. And this is based on the fact that at the beginning of the Bria, the entire ground was covered, the whole earth was covered with water. And the Kisei HaKavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chazal say, was Omed Ba'avir Merachef Al Pnei Hamayim. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu, on the second day of the creation, Hivdil Hashem Es Hamayim, he separated the waters with Rakia, which is Shamayim, as the pasuk says, "Vayasal ukimis Rakia vayavel bein hamayim asher mitachas Rakia bein hamayim asher me'al Rakia vayichen." And the source, according to Rabbi Yeshua, the origin of the Mei Geshamim is Mayim Elyonim, that those waters that were separated and went up towards the firmament, towards the sky. Now, the Ben Ish Chai has a whole other interpretation of this Gemara, and it's not about biology. These are all just symbols of spiritual concepts. Shenemar, from whence does Rabbi Yeshua derive this conclusion? It says in Devarim Yud Aleph, Limitara Shamayim Tishtem Mayim. And this indicates that the source of rain is Mayim Sheba Shamayim, because it says Matar HaShamayim. Nu Elamani Mekayim, what do I do with the pasuk of Rabbi Eliezer? The Eid Yalim in Aretz, that the mist of water is going up from the ground. And he answers, Malamicha Anonim is Gabrim V'olim Larakia, that the clouds become very powerful, so to speak, and they go all the way up from the ground to the Rakia. So in a sense, Rabbi Yeshua is like a compromised shita now. He's saying that the source of the water that waters the entire earth it begins with the aretz, with the ground. It goes all the way up to the rakia and into the clouds. Uposlim PM kinod makabel mot. And the clouds open their mouth like the opening of a node. A node is a English node. Something that holds water. A pitcher. Okay, it's a different word I'm looking for. It doesn't matter. John. And the clouds receive matter from a higher a higher place. So the water from the ground goes up to create the cloud formation, and the clouds themselves have openings into which the water comes from a higher source up in Shemaim. Chenemar, as the Pasuk says in Eov, Yazoku Matar Le'edo. Right? Yitzku Harakim Mayim Lanonim, which means that the Rakim, the upper firmaments, are injecting water from on high into the clouds, Umenukavosheim, Kekavra, and the clouds are perforated like a perforated sieve, a napa, ubos umachachos, mayim al gabe karka. And they sort of shoot down water from through these holes in the sieve to the karka. Shenemar Shmuel Beis, it says chashos mayim ove shchokim. So these very thick clouds that are up in the shchokim, which is one of the rakim, one of the firmaments up in the skies, they are like a kavra, like a sieve, and that's how the water comes down through the holes of the sieve in this cloud and waters the ground. V'ein bein tipa l'tipa el k'mlo nim. And there's a very small, let's say, separation between one drop and the other. They are never actually mechubaros. They don't become one, because since they go through the sieve and these little holes in the clouds, they are always separate, but yet they are not very far apart. How great is the day of rains? Like the day of creation. God does great things, and it's not even possible for us to understand the greatness of God and these miracles of Ksiv. And it says in Eov Hanose Matar al Pnei Oretz that God brings the rains on the ground. That the Ein Cheker, we can't understand how that happens. Uksiv la'alon, with regard to the creation of heavens and earth. Again, it says Ein Cheker. And that's in Yeshayahu Navi. Says, "Halo yadati im lo yadatim lo shamata Elokei olam Hashem." And then at the end of that pasuk, it says, "Ein cheker l'tunaso." There's no limit. It's so profound to understand the miracles of God. Imana Ozla, according to which shita should we understand this pasuk? It says in Tehillim, Mashke Harim Al Yosef, that God brings down the water through the mountains that are very high. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Al Yosef, that means Al Yosef Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, up in the higher realms of divinity. Keman, who does this support? Rabbi Yoshua, who said that the Geshamim come from a higher source, from the Elyonim. The Gemara asks, Rabbi Eliezer, he holds that the Geshamim come from the Mayim that's on the earth, like the Okainus. How is he going to explain this pasuk of Mashke Horem Al Yosef? Al Yosef sounds like it's coming down from on high. And he answers, came into Salki Lohosam. In other words, before the Geshamim comes down to this world from Shemayim, Mashke Al Yosef Korilu. In other words, even though the water begins on earth, but since it goes up to Shemayim, and then from Shemayim it comes down, therefore it's called Mei Al Yosef. So the word Mei Al Yosef from these higher realms in the sky is an appropriate word, because that's the place where the water is before it comes down to the earth. Dilo Tema Hachi, if you don't agree with me, how are you going to interpret the pasuk in the Tochacha? In Parshas Kisavo, it says, "Yitein Hashem es mitar atzva avak v'afar min hashamayim." It's like dust from the earth, from the heavens. Heichi mishkachas lo. How are you going to imagine such a thing? There's no avak or afar in the shamayim. So what does it mean that mitar atzva will become avak v'afar min hashamayim? There's no such thing. But rather, what the pasuk means is "Kevan de midlei lahasam once the avak and the ofar are lifted from the ground up to Shemayim before the waters come down, min ha-Shemayim korila. It's considered as if the source was in Shemayim, although it really begins with the earth, but then it comes higher and then comes down again. Let's apply the same structure to the source of Begishamim, of rainwater, came into Salki Lahasam, since it goes up from the ground and then it comes down from the higher realms, is there from Al Yosef Karila. Even though that's not really the source of the water, but that's where the water comes down to the earth. Kimana Oslo, the Yomer Reb Chanina, the pasuk that Reb Chanina interprets in Tilm Lamed Gimel, Ones Kaneid Me'ayom, no same Batrosa of Tomos. And Rabbi Chanina interprets the no same Ba'otros Tahomos, and these otros are storehouses, Mi Garam Lo Tsoros, Shismalu Bar. What is the cause that ultimately leads to filling up the silos with grain? And the answer is the Beis Shammim is responsible for the growth of the grain, Tahomos. And Tahomos means Mayim Sheba Aretz. The water comes from the depths of the ground. To Rabbi Eliezer, it can only make sense according to Rabbi Eliezer that the source of rainwater is down here on earth. For Rabbi Yeshua, how does he interpret this pasuk of no same batzoros tahomos, the word tahomos? And the Gemara answers, hahu, that pasuk, here we take a look at Daf Yud, is bibri social olam. At the time of creation, God gathered together all the water in the Aretz to one place, and he put them into storehouses so that they would be bounded, they wouldn't go beyond the boundaries. So Kones Kineid is a kind of a receptacle that has water in it, no saying Biotzoros Tahomos. God puts all the water that was spread throughout the entire earth, gathering them together in these Otsaros. We will stop for today on the top of Daf Yud, and that's Taner Rabbanon, and we're going to talk about Eretz Yisrael. So thank you very much, and have a great day.